Good morning. Morning in Australia. Wet, cold morning in Australia. How cold is it? It's cold by Australian terms. 18 degrees. 18 degrees on the Gold Coast, which is it's getting chilly, getting wintry. When it gets to 18 degrees, you've even got to get your Ugg boots out. Like that's how bad it is at the moment. Now, where are we? Where are we? We are live. Tend to only quote tweet the Twitter social. How's everyone going with their experiments with other social media platforms? Now, I ask because I'm trying really hard to post everything, not everything. I'm still trying to post a lot of stuff to Blue Sky and Mastodon. And there's just not a lot of people there. Like this is constantly the thing, and you can see it in the engagements. And I know, particularly for things like yesterday, I posted a home assistant thing. I want to do a panel. Like I want to do a. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole of discussion here in a moment. Tell you what, let me talk about that in a moment. I'll talk about the sponsor, and then I'll come back and we'll go down the home assistant rabbit hole. I got time today. It's been a busy week. I'd like to do some fun stuff. Sponsor, who should we get sponsor? Wayne's here. Hello, Wayne, James. Thank you, everyone who's joining in. Sponsor this week is Sneak. Now, I've had a nice long-standing relationship with Sneak. I have spoken at SneakCon in the past. I know that Sneak has been able to use a few of the Have I Been Pwned bits and pieces and the various things they do as well, so super happy about that. Sneak is running an event next week, 15th of May, to discover how to establish a security champions program, bridging security and development. Now, irrespective of the sponsor, who I only take when I agree with what they do, just incidentally, irrespective of the sponsor, the idea of a security champions program is excellent. And it's one of the things that I've seen firsthand a lot, because a lot of the time in my days of traveling around running workshops, it was to upskill people who are very frequently developer background into being security champions is the term they use. And very often what this means is you've got people who might be in a development capacity in dev teams writing software, but they will be the ones who sort of wear that security hat and champion, as the term is, InfoSec within the organization. Incidentally, I'm not reading their stuff yet. We'll get to that. The point is that what I really like about this idea is that we've spoken so much about security being something that has to, the old term was shift left. So go left in your software development lifecycle, rather than getting to the end of the entire project and then going, oh, we should put some security on and check that everything is fine. Doing it early and building it into the design and testing it as you go just has such a good ROI. So I think training is a great ROI. Like let's not make the mistakes in the first place rather than having to fix them later. And this is very much the value proposition of security champions. So anyway, back to Sneak. Building a security champion program, and it's on May 15, 11 a.m. ET, if you're over that side of the country in the US. Security champion programs are a proven way to scale security across large development teams. But building and implementing such a program comes with challenges. 1 hour session, they're going to guide you through the process of creating security champions program from scratch. Do go and check that out. And I'll put it another way as well. If you are not in a security capacity and you're in a tech capacity, security is cool. Like there is so much demand there. Who was I talking to yesterday? Someone about that, and they're like, this industry is just nuts at the moment. There is so much work. There are so many things to do. There's so much opportunity. It's really good fun. Whatever it is that motivates you, whether it's like breaking stuff or making money, or breaking stuff and making money, and having fulfillment in what you do, go and check it out. Like it's just such a cool thing if you can get yourself into that security role. I like it when my values align with sponsors. That's good. So, Sneak next week. Where were we? Home Assistant. JF is here as well. G'day. Morning. So, how far down the rabbit hole do we go? Our house was built, I think, about 30, 35 years ago, originally. And then about 20 years ago, it got heavily renovated. I've been here 10 years. Heavily renovated, which means that a lot of stuff now is about 20 years old. We had to replace a bunch of stuff in recent years, partly because we live on on sort of a beachy kind of area. We have a lot of salt water around. It's tidal. Salt water is not good for pretty much anything. Everything rusts. So we're replacing everything from door handles that had rusted through to spigots, the little brackets that hold things like the glass around the pool on, because they are rusted. Bike chains rust, like everything rusts, and everything gets replaced. And one of the things that we have to replace is air conditioning. So this is a part of the world where you have to have air conditioning because it's hot for a lot of the year. Even now, as it's down to such a chilly 18 degrees, overnight in the bedroom, it's still too hot without aircon. So aircon's a big thing. And we're doing some other works in the house that required us to move some aircon bits. And it's like, well, look, it's probably time to upgrade the aircon. Now, I'd looked at this a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I really wanted to do with aircon is IoT it, connect it into the home automation. Because I want to do stuff like I'm laying in bed and, let's say it's 1 a.m. and I wake up and I'm hot and I want to turn it on, or the other way around, I'm cold and I want to turn it off. And I tried to do this with our old unit, except the old unit had no connectivity whatsoever. No native connectivity. It also didn't have infrared, so I couldn't use like a Sensibo IR blaster or something like that. And my ultimate solution, which I'm still kind of proud of, is I took the Dicon unit that's on the wall and I got my vernier calipers out and I measured everything and I went into Fusion 360 and I designed a bracket to go around it with a little holder up the top. And then I got a switch bot that has a little arm that comes down like this, and I put it in the holder and the arm comes down and it turns the power for the aircon on or off. And then I've got an Akera Zigbee based switch just next to the bed, literally blue tacked onto the side of the wall, and I tap that and then it Zigbees into Home Assistant, and then it goes and Bluetooth down to the Sensibo and it pushes the button and the aircon goes off. And it looks really cool. And every time people see it, they're like, that's really, really cool. And I'm like, yeah, but it's kind of crap that I don't actually have internet connected aircon. So, and even yesterday we had these aircon people around and they're taking video of it. They're like, that's really good. So you guys are the professionals. Like, yeah, well, anyway. So we're going to put in a new system at great expense because air conditioning is not cheap, particularly when you've got to have two, what were they, 18 kilowatt units or something. And we're going to put in a system called My Air as the control panel. And My Air seems to be consistently the one where people are like, yep, that's got all the best integration into home automation, in particular Home Assistant. It's going to do everything we want in terms of integrating into the environment that we live in. And they've got a mobile app that works remotely, and just like everybody now has a mobile IoT app. Problem is, it does kind of look a little bit like it was drawn by a kid with crayons. Like it looks like it's about 15 years old. And we're going to buy this panel. And I think it's just like that the panel and the software and everything is like $1,000 or something. Aussie bucks. Let's call it 600 something American bucks. And it's going to go on the wall. And I just got to thinking, we probably need to do that anyway because we need all the IoT bits. But should I now go down the rabbit hole of having a dedicated Home Assistant panel where I do a nice dashboard and I put maybe a couple of them in different places in the house? There's one near the kitchen and you can control obviously the aircon and stuff, but get the weather details and flick on the security cameras and the doorbell cam and stuff like that. And I put this question out yesterday and some people, I just remembered how I started on this. I put it on Twitter, X, whatever, because that's where the Home Assistant people are. I don't know what would happen if I put it on the other ones. Anyway, the moral of the story is I think I might try and do a nice panel and a nice dashboard. And I think that would look really nice and it would look better than the My Air crayon-based user interface. James would love a picture of that. Yeah, well, if I do it right, I think it'd be really cool. I mean, your challenge as well, of course, is that whatever the panel is, then needs to be powered. So you've got to wire that into the wall, and you don't want to have cables running out of it because you want to make it look slick. I feel like I've seen iPad mini brackets before where the bracket covers like the power cable too, and it's a nice flush fit to the wall. I've got to give it some more thought. And I don't have any time. If you're a home Assistant guru, and you want to come work for me at my house for a few days to make this work, let me know. All right, what are you doing? Other things today. Got some governments on board. 2 new governments. Was I talking about Gambia as well? Where are we up to with this? Why am I talking about Gambia? That was last week. Anyway, governments on Have I Been Pwned? Let's just jump into that. So we sort of, in response to folks reaching out, we're adding more and more government agencies into Have I Been Pwned, insofar as they have the ability at a national level to query all of their domains for their constituency. The Australian Signals Directorate here has access to query anything that is .gov.au. Now, let me clarify, when I say constituency, they're government employees. So the ASD can't go through and query people who are on privateenterprise.com.au, but they can query everyone.gov.au because they are government domains, they have control of them, and they own them anyway. And what this does is it gets a lot of information about data breaches much more visible to the folks that are there protecting our country. Or in the case of the NCSC in the UK, or that's now transferred to the Cabinet Office, but they monitor the .gov.uk domains. We've got CISA in the US who does the same thing for them. And now with the Isle of Man being the last one here as well, I did put Gambian government there, but yes, so Gambia was last week, Isle of Man is this week. We are now up to 39. There is a 40th that will probably push out next week in a completely different part of the world, which is kind of cool. So I'm really happy to get those folks on board, and it's just always nice as well to hear about the challenges that folks like the Isle of Man has with their cybersecurity. I've not yet been to the Isle of Man. Now, what I didn't realise, the Isle of Man is not part of the UK. They're not part of the EU. They are a British Crown dependency that sets their own laws. That's why you can drive really, really fast there. And there's the Isle of Man TT, which of course is the thing that I know it from. But inevitably, they have their own cybersecurity arm. So the Isle of Man, what was the right name? It was like the OA something something. Let me get my information correct here. The Office of Cybersecurity and Information Assurance, the OCSIA in the Isle of Man. So they now have access to .gov.im and everything on that. So, good on those guys. And Gambia as well. A small West African country. I'd like to go to Gambia. That would be cool. I've been to Africa once. That was a long time ago. Sam says, how's the UK trip? Yeah, it was good, mate. It was, other than getting fished while I was there, but we'll talk about Passkeys in a moment. Other than getting fished while it was there, which is not the fault of the UK, it was really good. We had time in London, caught up with the aforementioned NCSC while we were there, and the NCA, which was great. Spoke at Oxford University. That's cool. Tick that off the list now. That was awesome. And I know it's not the UK, but then came back around to Ireland. And Ireland was really cool. And the Isle of Man is somewhere there in the middle. So now that I have a connection there, I think that is something that I'll try and do at some point. Should I try and go? It would be cool to go for the Isle of Man TT. It would be cool. But I bet it's busy. And I don't like being busy. All right, let's talk about Passkeys. So this is where things, this is where it all sort of began. I was sitting there in the UK with the NCSC on a Monday afternoon, a bit jet lagged, and we were talking about Passkeys. The whole subject of the meeting was around Passkeys and how do we drive passkey adoption. And the NCSC creates a lot of really, really good consumer-facing content. And of course, one of the things we're interested in is how do we move away from passwords and all of the problems associated with them. So we spoke a lot about how to drive adoption. And while I was there, about 12 hours before I got fished, I was saying I should write Passkeys for normal people. I should write something which makes it more consumable. Now, little did I know at the time, and I'm sure this is just coincidental and none of my friends at the NCSC thought this would be a good prank, but someone was crafting a phishing message that went to me and I got my MailChimp list phished, which, turn that sound off, which I have spoken about before. So there's nothing new to tell you on that one. But what I've now done in writing up passkeys for normal people, see how I didn't call it normies, so no one got upset. Passkeys for normal people is I've put a little bit of a flow here that describes how I got phished, because a lot of people are still like, how do you get phished when you have two-factor? Isn't two-factor there to stop you from getting phished? And when you read this blog post, you'll see it's actually a slide from the talk I did at NDC Melbourne last week. And it shows how I've gone to this phishing page that looks like a normal login page. We all know these. I put my credentials in. It submitted it in the background, obviously server side, to MailChimp. MailChimp's gone, yeah, that email address and password is right, but you need the two-factor, generate the two-factor screen, send that back to the phishing site. The phishing site is like, okay, sweet, we'll just create a two-factor input field and we'll send that to Troy. And because he's not paying attention, he will put the OTP in there and submit it back to the website, and we are good to go. Now, Passkeys solves this problem. And it solves it because passkeys are non-phishable. Now, a lot of people are sort of a little bit confused by the mechanics of this, and I did write this for normies. I'm going to say normies in this because it's got more character to it than just writing it and upsetting people. I wrote this for normies, so I didn't get into the weeds of it. But passkeys, first of all, are domain bound. Passkeys cannot be used on a site which they were not assigned to. So you can't take, for argument's sake, if MailChimp started supporting passkeys, which they have made absolutely no commitments on, by the way, not to me, you cannot take a phishing site for MailChimp and pass a MailChimp passkey to that site. Now, 1Password's actually got a good write-up about a little bit more depth of the mechanics of passkeys, that there is cryptography involved, there are public and private keys, things are checked and signed before they're submitted. You cannot take a passkey as a phisher person on your site and use it in any practical way. The only way you can really use the passkey is if you get it in storage from your keychain. And this is probably like a good point to focus on for a bit. I'll go back to the start. If we're going to create passkeys, and passkeys are effectively just digital files with crypto involved, like the actual crypto, not the money. I say every time these days someone says crypto, as if somehow that ubiquitously means cryptocurrency. It's annoying. Stop doing that. So when we're signing up for a passkey and the passkey is issued from the site, and how the site does that is up to the site. This is one of the great points of contention with passkeys, a little bit like password complexity criteria. Every site gets to decide how they do it. So I've got examples in here of WhatsApp, LinkedIn, and Ubiquity. And the way each one of them issues passkeys is different on every one, although not particularly confusing. Every website, you know you're going to go, some are in account, some are in security, some are in issue passkey. Something to that effect. It issues it. Your device then gives you the option to choose how you're going to save it. And this is really important. Where do you put your passkey? Because one of the big criticisms here, and this criticism is also relevant for OTP generators as well, is what happens if you lose your passkey? Or in the OTP case, what happens if someone set up Google Authenticator on their phone and then they get a new phone and then they erase the phone? And now this is one of the reasons I always liked using Authy, because it could sync. And 1Password has got an OTP generator in it as well, which of course will sync with your keychain. We'll come back to why that's not such a problem that you might think it is in a moment. So how are you going to sync your passkeys? Because the problem is, if we don't have a reliable way of synchronizing passkeys, we run the risk of outright loss. You've got it on one device and you lose it. A little bit like a U2F key. If you've got a YubiKey as an example, and that YubiKey is the only way you authenticate and you lose it, you've got a problem. So how do we make sure we have redundancy? How do we make sure we have accessibility? Because what if I'm on my PC here, I've got an iPhone here, I've got an iPad there, I've got another PC there. What if I want to set the passkey on one thing and then sign in with another thing? Like, we've got to have synchronization. And I think it's usually particularly like overly zealous security people who are like, oh, it shouldn't be in the cloud and it shouldn't sync. Well, it has to. It literally has to. If you don't, no one's ever going to use it, except for like that one bearded guy. And like that will be it. It has to be accessible to the normies. The thing I worry a little bit about is having vendor lock-in with an operating system. So for example, if I save my passkey to my keychain in iOS, like that's great for my iPad and my iPhone, but what about my PC? Now I have a problem. Now, it's not an insurmountable problem because many services allow you to sign into, say, a web app on your PC by scanning a QR code with the device that has the passkey. And it's sounding confusing even just saying it now. But I just don't think that's the best model. And I think to avoid the vendor lock-in situation, it is better to have an independent password manager. And of course, I have an affiliation with 1Password. There are others out there that can do this as well. But I like the idea of abstracting the way I manage my passwords away from my operating system so that I can choose operating systems. What if I don't want iOS later on and I get an Android? What if Windows Phone makes a resurgence? All right, I'll be serious. I want to have the options of where I authenticate, and I want to have all the material that I need to authenticate with me all the time. So that's why I like the idea of putting it in my password manager. Now, some people then in the thread here are like, well, what if someone gets into your password manager? That's easy, you're screwed. But the question trivializes the effort involved to get into the password manager. You know, this is not like account takeovers left, right, and center every day because all you've got is an email address and a password and you've reused the password everywhere and any man and his dog can log into a website as you. When you use a password manager in the way it's designed to be used and you turn on all the right security controls, which is not hard, the ability for someone to take over, say, your 1Password account is an extraordinarily high bar. And equally, if you're saving things into the iOS keychain, the ability these days to take over someone's Apple account is also an extremely high bar compared to the ability to take over any other account just on a website because you've got password reuse. There is a lock-in concern I do have, and I hadn't thought through it a lot before writing this, but someone raised the point. If you go into 1Password, you can export all of your accounts, all of your passwords, but not your passkeys. Now, I'm 99% sure that's the case. Someone from 1Password's listening to this and I'm wrong, please let me know, or if someone else knows. But I don't believe you can export your passkeys, and I think it may have to do with the way they're signed when they're actually issued in the first place. So you may be going down a path of lock-in to that particular provider. I would argue that's a good provider to be locked into, but I would also argue that I like not being locked in at all. So there is that problem, and we end up having to like chuck everything on the scales and go, well, if I don't use passkeys, I can get fished like Troy. It's a clunky thing to sign. Like passkeys are actually really, really nice to sign in with. So if I do have passkeys, then I can't get fished like Troy, and then I can log into my things really, really quickly, and it's a really smooth experience. And you got to kind of weigh it all up. And maybe the answer is we don't have a lot of sites in the complete scheme of things yet that support passkeys. Do it on the ones that are most important. Do it on your Google account, for example, your Microsoft account. I have it on my Stripe account. I have it on my Cloudflare account, my Ubiquiti account that manages my network. I probably have maybe a dozen passkeys, I think, at the moment. And that's fine. I have about I think it's about 1,000. I feel super, super nerdy even saying that. What does 1Password say? How many accounts do I have? Keeping in mind, part of my job has been to create accounts in lots of places just to try and figure out if there's data breaches or not. I can actually find that. Is it in Watchtower? Actually, yeah, Watchtower's a really good way. If you've not used, there's not meant to be a 1Password pitch either. If you've not looked at this before, 1Password's got a Watchtower facility where you can go through and you can see things like the compromised websites you've been in because they plug into Have I Been Pwned. There's one, let's see, there's 19 reused passwords. I don't know why that is. Why is that? Oh, interesting. I think it's because sometimes I have two entries for the same thing in there. Okay, that's interesting. I'll check those later. What else have I got in Watchtower? I've got 51 weak passwords. Now, that may well be because there's a bunch of websites where your password is just a PIN. So, yeah, a 4-digit number is going to be weak. There are 90 websites that have two-factor authentication available, but you haven't set it up yet. So, you know, stuff like that I think is actually really useful. And I cannot remember where to find my account of the number of accounts that I have. But it is some stupid number. Where's my private vault? Developer. No, it's not there. Huh. Anyway, I've got a lot. And the point is that passkeys are sort of one of the things, a little bit like physical security keys, where you probably, even if it's supported, probably not going to turn them on absolutely everything. Not yet, anyway. But turn on the important things. And look, a bunch of people have read this and they've gone, look, I was reticent. I read this. It seemed cool. I gave it a go. It's actually pretty good. There are definitely still gaps, still problems, and still friction. But it is the path forward from passwords. I'm pretty convinced now that this is the path forward away from something that is very, very problematic. Microsoft recently announced that all new Microsoft accounts, so I assume like the Outlook.com accounts, for example, will be passwordless by default with a preference for passkeys. So I think it's a bit of a sign of the times of which way we're going. Now let me just see what else is in here. A couple of little nuances. Not all passkey implementations are equal. And again, this is one of the problems when you've got so many different services doing passkeys in different ways. And I'll give you an example. LinkedIn. Now, I've had my LinkedIn account since, I don't know, since LinkedIn started, let's say 20 years. At some point in time, I turned on 2FA with an OTP. Since that time, they've started supporting passkeys. So I'm like, okay, cool. Because I got phished, I'm going to replace the OTP with a passkey for my 2FA. So you go in, you go through the setup process with LinkedIn, all pretty straightforward, no problems. And then I go into the 2FA section and I'm like, all right, let me now, there's actually a little drop down here where you can choose how you do 2FA. And the options are Authenticator app or SMS. That's it, even after you have a passkey. So I have a passkey and I can use it to sign in instead of a password, but I can't use it as a second factor. Further, I cannot remove the password from my account and just sign in with a passkey. So what this means is that my LinkedIn account still has a password, which is strong. I put that in my password manager. And because it's got a password, which can be phished, I want to have a second factor. But the only second factor I can choose is phishable 2FA. And also appreciate, I'm saying 2FA in the very general term. There are differences between 2FA and multi-step, and maybe it's not actually a different factor if you're doing it all from the same device, and yada, yada, yada. That doesn't matter. Doesn't matter for the normies. But do you see the problem here? Like we still have the same underlying risk because now we have the potential for a downgrade attack on LinkedIn. If you can convince someone as a phisher person to go and phish their credentials and then phish their OTP, it doesn't matter that they have a passkey because the passkey isn't along that critical path of authentication. I'll read the comments because it bugs me now. I'll come and read the rest of this post. Sam says, did I have fish and chips while I was in the UK? No. Just lots of Guinness once I've got to Ireland. James says, maybe a good analogy is your door key won't open the neighbour's house. I wrote a blog post years ago about how all IRL analogies are bad at explaining technology concepts. And I do think it's, I know what you're trying to say, but I don't think it's that. Because your door key is a physical thing. James says, for me, the problem is adding my backup YubiKey that are purposely not all in the same place in case of emergency. I hate bad reset methods too. So, I mean, the YubiKeys are another thing, right? And I guess if we look at the spectrum of it, we've got, and I did write a blog post about Google Advanced Protection, rather, some years ago that talked about the hierarchy of second factor authentication. It's like, look, you've got SMS OTPs, lots of risks with those. Still better than not having it. A lot of people don't get this. They're like, oh, SMS second factor is terrible. It's worse than not having 2FA at all. No, it's not. You still have the same factor that you would have whether you had 2FA or not, which is your password, and then you're adding something on top of that, and all you're arguing about is how good the extra thing that you add on is. If you take the extra thing away, you don't have the extra thing, so it's always better. There's SMS. Then there's the Authenticator app. We know the problems with that because I got phished. And then we've got the likes of Passkeys, which are non-phishable, and you have the usability convenience to sync them across things. And then you've got the YubiKey, which is even if someone does take over your 1Password account or your iCloud keychain, they've got to have the physical key. But of course, if you don't have the physical key with you, you're screwed. The mitigating control is you have 2 physical security keys, which I think is what James is saying. I always have one here in my office, and I always travel with one. So if I need to use it, I've got it there. But I got to be honest, like I started using physical security keys before Passkeys really gained traction. And now that Passkeys are really gaining traction, and the only way someone is going to get my passkey and have it usable is by getting into my 1Password, in which case I'm super, super screwed all kinds of ways. Geez, I thought the MailChimp fish was bad. That would be terrible. I wonder how much value there is in the gap between the extra security of the U2F security key and what's offered by Passkey. But anyway, the point is you can choose. Now, what I end up doing with Ubiquity is Ubiquity does this right. And I only realized they did it right when I went and set up some security cameras for my parents, and I had to create a Ubiquity account for them. And during the setup process, there was a process of let's call it a second step of authentication, where they sent an email to my parents with a 6-digit PIN, and I set up accounts for both of them. They had to log on with that. But as soon as I went into the Ubiquity website, they're like, would you like a passkey? Like, hell yeah, I'd love to give mum and dad a passkey, because it's easy to use. And when they log back in, all they'll do is just go, yeah, sure, send them passkey. So I realized that they did Passkeys, which was fantastic. So when I got home, I set it up for myself. I've got a little embedded video here in this blog post about how really slick it is to log on with a passkey to Ubiquity. One of the things I realized is that if you're going to have MFA, as they refer to it, turned on, you need to have 2 secondary factors of authentication. Now, if you go through the process like with mum and dad, you end up with passkey and email authentication. And that email authentication is a 6-digit PIN, which is obviously phishable. So how do you get rid of that? Well, you can have a physical security key. So your second factor can be 1 or more physical security keys. So you end up setting up your Ubiquity account where you've got the primary factor being your normal username and password. Your secondary factor is going to be a digital passkey and a physical security key. And what you're actually doing is you're storing the passkey on the physical security key, and you can have multiple physical security keys. And what I like about this is that every single one of those second factors is not phishable. So no one can phish the passkey that I have in my password manager, and no one can phish either the physical security keys that are now associated to my Ubiquity account. If I lose them all, I think it's going to be bad. But this is almost one of the points that keeps coming up here in the thread here about loss and recovery. I have 2 keys that, okay, when I'm at home, they're both at home. But when I travel, one is with me and one is at home. And they're physical keys, obviously. But then I have the digital key, which is the passkey, and that's sitting there in my 1Password. What are the circumstances that would lead to losing every single one of those? Well, not the house burning down, because I've still got everything in my password manager and it's cloud synced. There would have to be 2 completely different events, as best I can tell, to completely lose access to all of my security keys. And one of them would have to be like the complete loss of my keychain for 1Password and every single place that it's synced and backed up on: iPhone, iPad, PC, laptop. And then the other thing is I'd have to lose both the physical security keys. I think the likelihood of it happening is extraordinarily remote, and the impact is one of availability as opposed to loss or disclosure. Yeah, I feel good about that. So anyway, it's early days, but the point is, if you can give it a push, and also go and check out Passkeys .directory. .directory is actually the TLD. So Passkeys.directory is run by 1Password. It lists a whole bunch of major services that support passkeys in the screen cap here. We've got things like Adobe, Air New Zealand, Albert Heijn. Albert Heijn is a grocery store chain in the Netherlands. That's really cool. That is a very, very mainstream service, and they support passkeys. There is a differentiation here between whether they support them for sign-in, i.e. replacing your password, hopefully replacing your password, unless you're linked in which case you've just got two different ways of signing in now. Or do they support it for 2FA, or maybe both? And then there's another tab here from 1Password says vote for passkey support. And if you vote for passkey support, you then end up on this list of all of these different services. Let's go and have a look at them now. G'day, Stefan. Thank you for joining. We should talk about some of our own Pwned stuff too, shouldn't we? Passkeys.directory. The number one thing when I checked the other day, or the number one service voted for passkey support was Steam. 23,000 votes there. And that, you know what's interesting? Like, if you look at the list, the number two thing is Netflix. Now, Netflix has a massive account takeover problem because they have a very low barrier to entry for authentication. And if you don't believe me, just like go to Twitter and search for Netflix hacked and see how many people are like, someone hacked my Netflix account and now everything's in Portuguese and I don't understand what's going on. And also Disney Plus up there too. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of really, I guess, mainstream services out here where people are saying, hey, let's do passkey support. I do have a little project in mind related to this as well. In fact, I think I said it when I got when I got fished and wrote the phishing post. I want to do a Why No Passkeys website like I did Why No HTTPS years ago, which will be like a shame list of the biggest services in each country that don't yet support passkeys. And then we'll see if we can get a little bit of like pitchfork torch wielding folks in each of those countries to try and drive adoption of passkeys. VXDB is here. I don't know if I could ever switch to a CUD, maybe on cloud synced password manager. I've been using KeePassXC for 5 years now, and I love the fact it's fully local. I think the thing is as well to recognize that the solutions that are suitable for the techies like us are not necessarily the same solutions that are suitable for the normies like my parents. Now, having said that, I do the same thing with my security as I do with my parents because I really want cloud sync because of so many different devices and travel and everything else. But I've turned every single possible security control on that 1Password account up to 11. So it's not impossible to get into it, but it's a very, very high barrier to entry. Mike's here. British Airways has recently introduced passkeys. Cool. Considering how clunky their login process is, it's a huge improvement in usability as well as security. Yeah, and I mean, this is actually one of the other really relevant points. Most of the security controls that we have by design add friction, and they impact usability in negative ways. Passkeys and also password managers are one of the really few security paradigms we have where it makes you more secure and also improves usability. It's usually the other way around. And if you don't believe me, like even just go and have a look at that video, that the two-factor authentication into Ubiquiti, I think I said it was 7 seconds from start to finish, the authentication process. I cannot type any sort of reasonable password in less than 7 seconds. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yep, it's beautiful, nails it, does really, really well. Okay, let me talk about the next thing, travel. So I wrote the other day about having planned a trip into Europe, and as we've done with that recent UK trip that who was talking about that? Was it Sam was asking about just before, and the US trip last year. Every now and then we look at a part of the world and go, "There's a bunch of cool people over there. Let's go there, and then we'll figure out the details, and we'll go and meet with some of the governments that used to have I Been Pwned. We'll do some public events, and that will be cool." So I wrote a blog post about this the other day about doing a bit of an alpine tour, because it's also a nice time of year. Like it's June, it's summer. It's a nice time to go around that sort of Switzerland, Austria, Germany, Italy kind of area. So I wrote that, and of course now we're lining up a bunch of really cool stuff. So our plans next month, and if you listen to this later on and you're in one of these places and want to catch up, and particularly if you want to organise a public event, let me know. Our plan is we'll actually be in Dubai for a couple of days, and there are some work things that we'll make the most of while we're there. And I haven't been to Dubai in summer either. I'm kind of curious what that's going to be like. Then we'll go to Munich, and from Munich go to Liechtenstein. The Liechtenstein government is on Have I Been Pwned, so we'll definitely be catching up with those folks. From Liechtenstein, we'll head over to Zurich. We will have a public event in Zurich. We're just waiting for the announcement on that. It will be within that Microsoft ecosystem of people. We'll be heading off to somewhere along here to Geneva to visit CERN. I was at CERN in 2019. Got to see the Hadron Collider, which was really, really cool. Got to see the Hadron Collider, then got to see Tim Berners-Lee's office where he developed the World Wide Web, and then got to do a talk to the folks at CERN about how messed up the World Wide Web now is. So we're going to do that again. We'll be back in Geneva, which will be really cool. We'll be in Lyon in France, catching up with some French Gov folks there. I think that will be a closed event. And then I put out a tweet last night. I am looking for some folks in Monaco. So the Monaco, I assume a little bit like the Isle of Man, is like a self-governing entity that does have its own cert. I'm trying to find the right contacts there. And then from there, we'll end up in Rome. And same thing, trying to find folks in Rome. So the Italian government is using Have I Been Pwned. I'm trying to reach folks there. I'd really like to do a public event. We will have a little bit more time in Rome. So I'm also looking at the Microsoft channels as well to see if we can find the right people there. And then from there, we'll start heading back to Munich, up through Italy. Stelvio, if you're a car person and you've seen Stelvio pass on the TV, you'll know why I want to go there before hitting the Autobahn again as well. So again, car person thing. So that's the plan. If you're on that route, and especially, again, if you can do a public event, and especially Monaco and Rome are the two places that we're really trying to fill in at the moment, please let me know. That'll be in the second half of June. Okay, what's comments here? BXDB is fully aware that if they lose their backups, they won't have access to any of their accounts, but I don't want to have to share my passwords with anyone other than myself. You know, one thing, speaking for 1Password, is that it is all encrypted on your device. Short of them compromising your device in order to get the password and it's in the clear, they don't have access to anything that is in that keychain, and they get independently audited and have wonderful things said about them every time. So I understand what you're saying, but you know, this is your decision to trade off on too. And I think if nothing else, at least we have choices where it's like, look, you can run everything locally, you can run it on physical keys if you want, or you can cloud sync it. There are upsides, there are downsides, but I suspect you understand all those. James says he loves KeyPass too. A little responsible maintenance, so you have a backup and you're fine. This is the problem with normies. Responsible maintenance, that's the problem. Mike says 2 Europe trips in just over 3 months. We're being spoiled. I was there 3 times last year. I was in Norway 3 times last year. I think a combination of us having a business, for want of a better term, where everything is online, and everyone that uses it is everywhere, and also having a Norwegian wife, we end up on both sides a lot. Now, since Stefan's here as well, Have I Been Pwned? We'll talk much more about that next week. There's another blog post I'm going to publish as soon as I wrap up this video as well about some things we're doing with that. We are going to hit this deadline of the 17th of May is when we are going to be pushing that new UI live. So that is going to happen weekend after this. So really 1 week from now, Stefan and I in our private integration environment should have a production ready website. Preview.haveibeenpwned.com is still up there. We've still got our man Ingeborg in Iceland doing the final user interfaces for that. It's looking absolutely beautiful. I'm really, really stoked about it. Our integration work, I think Stefan's fair to say, is mostly going really well. Where the issues we've run into is it's not really hard problems, is it? It's things like, you know, should we take a whole bunch of the JavaScript that Ingeborg's written and then put it into TypeScript and then generate JavaScript from that? And what about some of the optimizations and the linting and it goes on because there are now so many different moving parts. But I'm super happy with how it's looking. I think it's looking absolutely amazing. And every time I see it now, I'm just happy. Charlotte is trying to get some merch sorted out before that go live as well. So she's trying to sort out some t-shirts and some hoodies and things like that. And then you'll just be able to go online, buy them at cost. It's definitely not something you want to try and make money out of. It's freaking t-shirts. In just the same way as there's stickers. So it might all end up just going into Sticker Mule because they have an online store and we already have the stickers there. But we've got all the artwork in the public domain as well, so people can make their own. So hopefully this time next week, I'll try and do this video at the same time each week now, we'll be able to say, yeah, we're ready to go. And if you watch over the weekend, you'll see some stuff change. And yeah, then I guess we'll just find all the things that are bugs, which are inevitably going to sneak in, and we'll fix them. But anyway, that's where we are. And once we have that platform out and we're not sort of maintaining two different versions and everything's stable, and we've now got this foundation where we've got a proper authenticated dashboard and all the rest of it, we'll be able to start doing so much other stuff that people have been asking for. One of the things that comes up a lot is people are like, I really want to be able to monitor the accounts of, say, my parents or my family. I want to be able to put their email addresses in, have some sort of a verification process where they go, yeah, sure, you're fine to get alerts if I'm in a data breach. And that's what I'd like. And we'll be able to start doing that. We'll have an interface where you just go and like put the whole family in there, verify each email address, and that will be really cool. We can look at a whole bunch of other things that are there in the backlog that are on user voice at the moment, which we just simply haven't been able to do. I will get some time back to start processing more data breaches because that's taken a little bit of a back seat whilst we've been doing the rebuild. And fortunately, there haven't been any like really major incidents where suddenly there's some new breach of 100 million records and I load it and get smashed by tickets and queries for 3 days. So if anyone's breaching stuff, please hold off. Also, don't breach stuff. This isn't a suggestion, but I appreciate the quiet period at the moment. Martin says, some of us got preview stickers and 3D logos in Oxford. Oh, yes, you did. I'm going to have to print more of those, actually, before I go on this next trip. I just ordered 10,000 stickers. We are now convinced enough that the stickers are spot on, as they are. So I just ordered a load. So anyway, they'll be ready for Europe. 10,000 will do us for Europe. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up there and go back to writing code. Stefan, I promise I would write some code today. I didn't get time to yesterday because of all the other things, but yeah, get into that. Last one here, Ben. Sorry, Troy, late to the party. You just made it. Have you seen the ongoing cyber attacks against UK retail targets? Yeah, Co-op is in there, Harrods is in there. There's another one, isn't there? Sounds like massive social engineering effort from the attackers. And I think from memory, some of that sounds like ransomware as well. I don't necessarily know that it's like the UK under attack or if it's the UK is on the internet, and it's coincidental, but stay tuned. M&S, Marks and Spencer's as well. Yeah, so Marks and Spencer's, Co-op and Harrods. So they're probably, would you say, 3 of the biggest well-known retail brands in the UK, which is massive. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap up there and I'll see you in a week's time.